Hello everyone, today we are going to be doing a deck tech for Urza, Chief Artificer. Urza has affinity for artifact creatures, which means he costs a colorless less or generic mana less for those new players. For each artifact creature you control, he gives your artifact creatures menace, and then at the beginning of your end step, you're going to make a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. We're going to be calling them constructs for now on. So this is going to be Esper Urza artifacts. So the main game plan, we're going to win through constructs, which is these bozos to the right. They are 0/0s. They get +1/+1 for each artifact you control, so they're going to get bigger and bigger. Urza is going to give them menace, so they're going to be annoying to block. We are going to play artifact support to help maximize our team, and by swinging in with these big boys, it's going to kill our opponents. Going into Planeswalkers, Tezzeret the Seeker. We're mainly running Tezzeret because it is -X. So a fun trick you can do with Tezzeret is you can -X, and X is 0 to get your artifact lands to the battlefield tapped. We can also use it to get any kind of utility for whatever artifacts we need that are mana 4 or less to get it straight to the field. We're not really going to ult him because it kind of does what we're doing anyways, but his +1 is nice if we can't really get anything going on. Tezzeret, Agent of Bolus. We're primarily going to be using him for his +1, looking at the top 5 cards, getting an artifact from him, and putting him in our hand. His -1 isn't very relevant, but funny enough, we are going to be making a lot of artifacts in this deck, so his -4 could just kill someone. Now, Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. The main reason we're running him is because creatures and planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. Well, we're an artifact deck, so everything's going to be costing a lot less. He's also nice because his +2 is going to, gain a bunch of life and hurt our opponents. He's going to give us some artifacts from our graveyard back to our hand. And then if we get him to ult somehow, then we have a silly little surprise. We get a bunch of artifacts to the field. Going into creatures, Baleful Strix, 1/1 with flying and death touch, so it's a fantastic blocker, and it'll draw a card. As we go on, I want to preface everything in this deck is pretty much made to help support making constructs bigger and having them beat in. So Bronze Guardian, he's a X5 double strike for 5 with Ward 2, and he's going to give our other artifacts Ward 2, and then he can be pretty big himself. So at face value, he's a 1/5 with double strike for 5 and Ward 2 that also protects our field, makes it a little more annoying to deal with. Or he can swing in for a lot of damage potentially. Dig Site Engineer, whenever we cast an artifact, we can make a construct. That's pretty good. It's a 3/3 for 3, which is a great rate. Emry, Lurker in the Lock. It's going to cost less. It's basically going to be a free spell for a 1/2. When it enters, we're going to mill 4. Not super relevant, but the thing that we're going to use Emry for is tapper, choose an artifact in our grave, and we can cast it. It's just some good recursion. Esper Sentinel is just good card draw. That's pretty much why we're doing him. He taxes our opponents or we draw cards. He's very good. And Ethereum Sculptor is a cost reducer for our artifacts. Aethersworn Canonist is meant to be annoying. It's basically to punish our opponents while not really doing anything bad for us. Foundry Inspector is another cost reducer. And Kappa Engineer or Cannoneer is very, very good. It's improvised, which basically means you can tap your artifacts to pay its mana cost. It has Ward 4, but it says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control and he counts himself, put a 1/1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn. So we're going to be making a lot of these guys, and it's whenever an artifact enters, which is going to be pretty frequently, he's going to be a big unblockable guy that, again, is hard to deal with. Kuldotha Forge Master. Tap it, sack 3 artifacts, get an artifact from our deck straight to the field. It's just a good tutor. Again, we're going to be making a lot of tokens. Lasheel is an interesting one. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control. So basically, we can swing in our constructs and not really have to worry about, like, oh, our opponent's creatures are too big or whatever, because they're not going to die to death touch or whatever. And then whenever one or more artifact creature enters the battlefield, we draw a card. We can only do it once a turn, but still, that's very, very good in just more card draw. Master of Ethereum, he is at face value a 1/1 that gives other artifact creatures +1/+1. He's just a very good lord. That's really all he is. Mere Battlesphere. Mirror Battlefield's going to enter, and it's going to give all of our constructs +5/+5. The reason we're running this is because, well, that effect, it's also a 4/7 to make a bunch of guys, and then when it attacks, we can basically swing in for a lot of damage. It also synergizes with something else we'll talk about a little bit later. Noxious Gearhulk I just think it's good removal. When he enters the battlefield, destroy another target creature, and then you gain life equal to its toughness. It's just good removal, and again, we're mainly an artifact deck. Plus, he's a big body. Padim, he gives our artifacts hexproof, and ideally, he'll draw us an extra card on our turn. Phyrexian Metamorph, it just gives us another one of our best things. That's pretty much it. It's kind of situational, but it's just another copy of whatever we need, and it's an artifact. Sai, whenever we cast an artifact, we make a 1/1 flyer artifact. Very good. And then we can sack 2 artifacts to draw a card. So we can draw a card in a pinch, and he can kind of help us deal with any kind of flying creatures our opponents may have. Scrap Trawler. Whenever it or another artifact you control is put into a graveyard, return to your hand target artifact card from your graveyard with lesser mana value. So basically, when our things are dying, they're going to kind of replace themselves. Sharding Sphinx. Whenever an artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, make that many 1/1 blue Thopters. Again, it's just more flooding. It's kind of like a mess because you attack with a construct to say you deal 5, right? Then you get 5 1/1s. Well, all your constructs are +5/+5, and it just kind of like gets bigger and bigger. Kind of snowballs. Solemn Simulacrum enters battlefield, get a basic. When he dies, draw a card. And he's an artifact creature. I think he's fine in this deck. I think he's good ramp, and I think he's a good card draw. Plus, like we're an artifact deck, we can get him back if we need to. And I think he's good. Steel Overseer. Tap him, put a 1/1 counter on each artifact creature you control, and he counts himself. He's basically a lord. That's really how you have to look at him as he is. He's a lord. Thought Monitor, affinity for artifacts, so it's never going to cost 7. It's going to cost ideally 1 or like 2 or 3. It flies. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. That's really all we're using it for. Is ideally it's a 1 mana flying 2/2 that draws us 2 cards. Urza comes into play. He makes a construct. He makes all of our artifacts essentially mock sapphires. That's really what that middle ability does. And then we can pay 5 mana, shuffle our library, and then play the top card for free. Not really. We don't have any big mana sinks. But the fact that he can make all our stuff mock sapphires, and that he makes a construct when he enters, I think is very good. Again, we have our third Urza in the deck. Urza, Prince of Krug, gives our artifact creatures +2/+2. Then we can pay 6 at instant speed, and then we just make a token copy of an artifact we control, except it's a 1/1 soldier in addition to its other type. Which is nice, because if we have any kind of utility artifacts, or let's take Thought Monitor, for example. Pay 6 mana, we just draw 2 cards at instant speed with Thought Monitor. For the final creature, we have a Vedalken Archmage. Whenever you cast an artifact, just draw a card. I'm very skeptical about the 4 mana cost for a 0/2, but I think the upside of the ability is definitely worth keeping him in. I actually lied. This is our last creature. I wanted to put this aside because they're Meld. So we're running our 4th Urza in the deck, Urza, Lord Protector. The main reason we're running him is because he's a 3 mana 2/4 that makes our artifacts, instants, and sorceries cost 1 less. We're an artifact deck, so he's a cost reducer. Plus, we also have a decent amount of instant and sorceries, so it's just kind of a little bit extra. Then we can have 7. We can meld them in. We're running the Mightstone and Weakstone. This is mainly flavor, but I think it's very good aside from that. It's basically a 5 mana artifact that either straight up just kills the creature by giving it -5/-5, or it draws us 2 cards, and then it's still a mana rock in the very end. So even if, like in a weird roundabout way, it kind of only costs 3 mana because we still net 2, even though it's a Power Stone, I still think it's pretty good. We're going to meld them together. We can get Urza, Planeswalker. You can activate his abilities twice. And I think, I just think he's good. We can plus him twice to bring him to like 11 loyalty to make our artifact spells cost 4 less and gain 4 life. We can draw cards, we can make soldiers, we can exile things. I just think he's very, very good. And then he's just a nuke in the very end. Artifacts and Planeswalkers gain indestructible on the turn, destroy all non-lands. I think he's very good. If we can get to him, he pretty much says win the game, assuming he's left alone. But yeah, I think he's very good. You can make 4 bodies. You can just get rid of 2 things. You can draw a bunch. He's kind of very situational for what you need. And if we can get him out, I know 7 mana at sorcery speed is a lot, but I think the upside's worth it. I think he's worth the risk. Let's go to our sorceries. Austere Command. We're running, since constructs are our main way to win, we're going to be using this just as like kind of how we need it, right? So ideally, we don't want to destroy all creatures with mana cost 3 or less. Or we don't want to destroy all artifacts. So really what it's there for is to destroy all creatures with power of 4 or greater and to get rid of enchantments. But then again, like, if you got something on the board you really can't deal with, someone's playing token decks or Crater Hoof's coming in, you know, you gotta take it as is. Someone has infinite combos with artifacts, you figure it out as you go. Dance of the Mints, return X target artifacts and non-aura enchantments. Not super relevant. We've got a couple enchantments. You just bring them back to the battlefield, and then if X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4s. It's just good recursion, and then even if we do decide to pump out and like do it all, we just get like what, for 8 mana we get 6 4/4s and recursion. Fabricate, search your deck for an artifact, put it in your hand. Short, sweet, simple. It's a nice tutor. Farewell is another one that's basically just like Austere Command. We really don't want to say artifacts or creatures, but again, it's a good way to get rid of enchantments, get rid of graveyards. But again, really whatever the deck's calling for, it's a nuke. March of Progress is a new card. Choose target artifact creature you control. For each creature chosen this way, create a token that's a copy of it. And then it has Overload. So we're really going to look for the Overload cost. So it basically just says double up your whole field. And in constructs, that's going to make all of your guys twice as big with twice the guys. One with the machines, 4 mana, draw a card equal to your highest converted mana cost among artifacts. It's just a good draw spell, I think. I think it has potential to draw us a lot of cards. Like Thought Monitor's 7 mana. It's really only going to cost us like 1 or 2 to do, but the mana cost is still 7, so we could get 7 cards for 4 mana. Organic Extinction. Another card from Kamigawa, has Improvise, so it can be cheap, and it just destroys all non-artifact creatures. And we're an artifact creature deck, so that's kind of convenient for us. Their Name is Death. 6 mana, destroy all non-artifact creatures. Same exact thing, we're running artifact creatures. And then Thoughtcast is affinity for artifacts, so ideally, again, it should just cost 1 or so, but it lets us draw 2 cards. Looking at instants, it's primarily removal. Anguished Unmaking to get rid of something we don't like. Counterspell to stop something coming through. Cyclonic Rift, if we can just bounce someone's whole field, we can probably kill our opponents. Dispatch, it doesn't tap a creature because we're going to have Metalcraft. It's going to exile that creature. It's just, at that point, better Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile is just better. Dovin's Veto is Super Negate. And then Teferi's Protection is just in case someone decides to nuke us or do anything we don't like, we can try and sneak out of it. The final instance are Thirst for Knowledge, 3 mana, draw 3, and then discard an artifact. And then Void Rend, which is just uncounterable, get rid of a permanent at instant speed. Looking into our artifacts, most of our artifacts are our artifact creatures and Urza making constructs by himself. Arcane Signet is just a mana rock. Azorius Signet is another mana rock. Bolas the Citadel, if it happens, hopefully we just win the game. And at pretty much, we could very easily just sacrifice 10 non-lands to make everyone lose 10 life. Overall, great artifact. Cranial Plating is a funny card I really like. 2 mana, equip creature you control gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. Now, here's the thing about it, is it has an equip cost of 1, right? That's how you normally do equipment. But it has black, attach Cranial Plating to a creature you control. The thing is you can only equip at instant speed, at sorcery speed, but you can do the attach ability at instant speed. So that means when our opponent declares blocks, whatever isn't blocked, we can pay 2 mana and just put Cranial Plating on it. And then they're going to take a ton of damage because we're going to have a ton of artifacts. It's kind of like a way to sneak in... It's like a way to just sneak in damage, pretty much. Like, a lot of damage, though. And your opponent really can't do much about it because no matter how they block, you can just be like, oh, I'll put it on something else. It just doesn't matter. We have Dimir and Orzhov Signet, just 2 more mana rocks. Orzhov Signet, same thing. Soul Ring, it's Soul Ring. Thopter Shop is a new card I like. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control dies, draw cards. So it kind of helps us out. And then we can pay 3 mana to just make a flying 1/1 on a stick. I don't know how great it is, but I like the idea of being able to just make 1/1s at instant speed, and also just like if they die, it's still okay. Like even like in a bad sense, like an opponent can attack us and we can just pay 3 mana, chump block with a 1/1 and draw a card. I think that's great. Time Sieve. I like Time Sieve. Tap it, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. This could be done for nukes. This could be done for really any number of things. If you get a ton of tokens, you're feeling frisky, you can take an extra turn. And I think since we make a lot of artifacts anyways, it's going to help us out. And then Unwinding Clock is going to untap all of our artifacts during each other player's untap step. This is relevant because it's going to essentially give our creatures vigilance. It's going to make our mana rocks be able to untap as if we didn't use it. And it's also going to untap our artifact lands. So we're going to have like mana for instant speed stuff. Biotransference. 4 mana, it's an enchantment. It looks like an artifact. I think that's weird about the 40k, but that's for another time. Creatures you control are artifacts in addition to their other types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So it just makes all of our creatures artifacts, right? And then whenever we cast an artifact, we lose a life and we make a 2/2 artifact creature, which is kind of nice because it's like we do have some creatures that aren't artifacts that have good utility, like Emery and Sire and even Urza himself, right? So it kind of helps grow constructs a lot more. And just casting an artifact, losing life, and getting a 2/2 is pretty good. Efficient Construction, whenever you cast an artifact, make a 1/1 with flying. Pretty much the same concept as Biotransference, except a little bit worse. I'm hesitant about it. It might be a little bit slow, but I think it's good. Mechanized Production. 4 mana, enchant an artifact we control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts, you win the game. Sorry, that have the same name as one another, you win the game. So I mentioned Mer Battlesphere earlier. If we enchant Mer Battlesphere, Mer Battlesphere comes in naturally and he makes 4 Mirror. And then on our upkeep with Mechanized Productions, he'll make another 4 Mirror. Mirror tokens all have the same name. That's 8 tokens. And yeah, we'll win the game. Now, that's not the whole reason it in. I think it's just a funny synergy with Mer Battlesphere. But since we're going to be making a lot of constructs, we can just, or tokens in general, we can put this on one of our better artifact creatures like Steel Overseer or whatever and really pump it out. And then sometimes if we have 8 or more artifacts, like since constructs are our main way to win, we could just win the game incidentally. Mirrored and Besieged has 2 ways to do it. When it enters, choose Mirrored or Phyrexian. Whenever you cast an artifact, create a 1/1 colorless mirror. That's why I have it in here, but I also think it's a funny idea for Phyrexian. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card and then discard a card. That ability's fine by itself. Then if there are 15 or more artifacts in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. Now, I don't think that it's for sure possible to do. I just don't think it's really as reliable. I think in this instance, with this card, I think early game it comes in, you play Mirren, right? But if you have a loaded graveyard, you could just say Phyrexian and kill someone, you know? Smothering Tithe, a very good card. It taxes our opponent, it gives us extra mana, but more importantly, those artifact treasure tokens are, artifacts, so they're going to make our constructs even bigger. Like, it's just going to be they're just going to make it very big. Any wheel effects are going to crank them up, or just opponents not wanting to pay tax on drawing is going to make our constructs bigger and bigger. And then Tempered Steel, short, sweet, to the point. Artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. It's just really just going to make our constructs bigger. Thopter Spy Network. At the beginning of upkeep, if we control an artifact, we just will make a 1/1 flying Thopter. And then, whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Pretty convenient because it just makes 1/1s with evasion anyways. Let's look into lands. Academy Ruins. Taps for a colorless, not that good, but we can pay 1 and a blue, tap it, put an artifact from our grave on top of our deck. I think it's a real nice thing to do at instant speed, so we can kind of set up our draws if we need it. Ancient Den. Taps for a white, but it's an artifact land. It's going to make our constructs bigger. It's going to work with stuff like Time Sieve. If you want to sacrifice lands for an extra turn, it's going to work with Unwinding Clock. It's going to count basically for Metalcraft. It's going to help. Arcane Sanctum, we're an Esper, and it taps for all of it. Command Tower, it's good. Untapped 3-color land in this deck. Darksteel Citadel, it's an indestructible artifact land that taps for a colorless. Again, all the artifact lands generally have the same idea of they're going to make our constructs bigger, and just them being indestructible. If someone decides to destroy all artifacts, like, at least we will still have them and we won't have to, like, restart. Deserted Beach, I decided to run all of the Vow and Hunt lands I can, just because I think they're good in Commander. You know, you play them turn 3 and they're just untapped duels. Drowned Catacombs, we're running all the check lands. I think they're fine with all that. Generally, they come in untapped. Running Exotic Orchard, I think running Exotic Orchard in any 3+ color deck is very worth it, because more likely than not, when you build a deck, or at least when I build decks, I imagine that I'm playing them in a 4-person pod, including myself. So the likelihood that one of my opponents is at least playing one of my colors makes it good, right? So it's like, typically it taps for any color you really need. Glacial Fortress, same thing, Drowned Catacomb, we're running the checks. Godless Shrine, we're also running the shocks. You'll see Hallowed Fountain there for a second. But before that, Goldmire Bridge, it enters tapped, it's an indestructible land, and it taps for a white or a black. Again, this is good for stuff like, you know, Unwinding Clock, and it's also something good for Tezzeret the Seeker, which I stated actually the very first card of the video. You can pay 0 on Tezzeret to start getting lands from your deck to the battlefield tapped. Very, very nice. Inventor's Fair. If we control 3 or more artifacts, we gain a life. We can tap to add a colorless, but the big ability is 4 mana, sacrifice it, and we search our deck for an artifact and just put it in our hand. We can only do it if we have 3 or more artifacts, but I mean, for a artifact tutor on a land, I think it's very, very good. Isolated Chapel, a check land. Misfall, just another indestructible artifact land duel. Morphic Pool, we're running these just because, again, assuming that you're playing in a commander pod of at least with 3 opponents, it's going to enter untapped. Raffine Tower, it's a plain island swamp, taps for all of our stuff, and if we don't want it late game, we just cycle it away, draw a card. Razortide Bridge is the final artifact indestructible bridge. Sea of Clouds for another one of the Battle Bond lands, because we're going to have 2 or more opponents. Seat of the Synod, again, just artifact land for blue. Shattered Sanctum, another one of the Vow and Hunt lands. Another one of the Vow and Hunt lands for Shipwreck Marsh. Spire of Industry, very good. Taps for a colorless, or we can pay a life and tap it and get a color of anything to our mana pool. We can only do it if we have an artifact, but I mean, come on, when are we not going to have an artifact? And then we have Treasure Vault. Treasure Vault's nice because it's an artifact land. It's going to grow our constructs. It taps for a colorless, but it's also, in a fun way, like a combat trick, right? Because we could put a bunch of mana into it and then tap it to make a bunch more artifacts, treasure tokens, that'll grow the construct. So if, like, we could just pay 6 into it and give all our constructs, like, +3/+3, just, like, right away. Vault of Champions, Battle Bond land, you know, just 2 or more opponents. Vault of Whispers, artifact land. Watery Graves, the final shock land. Going to basics, we really don't have many. We just don't, because the artifact lands, they kind of cover it for us. 3 plains, 3 islands, 2 swamps. That gets the job done for us. I think it's about 35 lands. Miscellaneous info about the deck. It's about $441, $450-ish, buying from TCG Player. Prices are weird, though, because of the Brothers War, so this is probably going to go down when everything settles out. Plus, just by people buying the pre-con and opening more and more of these, it's going to for sure make it go down. And the average CMC of the deck is 3.67, so I think running 35 lands, not including any rocks or anything, I think it's good value. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe to me so you can see more of it, and then comment what you want me to do next, and then I'll probably just do it. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next time.